I don't know why anybody lets this guy go out and debate with anybody ever. He's actually very brave and stupid. No, those are the diagnostic criteria. You were dick.
You said it, I'm going to quote you here. Gender dysphoria is listed in the DSM. Maybe it shouldn't be, but as of now, gender dysphoria itself is a mental illness. Maybe we'll look back and say that it shouldn't have been. Still stand by that statement.
Yeah, the DSM-5 lists gender dysphoria as a mental illness. Yeah, they changed it from gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria, partly because that would make it sound less stigmatizing or whatever, but it's listed alongside all the now
it's not listed as mental illness though. I mean, to do that is something that right-wingers do. I think you specifically to be able to, again, like you just mentioned, stigmatize trans people, but it's not listed as mental illness. That's a factually incorrect statement to make. It's not.
By the way, listing gender dysphoria as a mental illness is better than listing being trans as a mental illness, because if trans is a mental illness, you have to cure the transness. Gender dysphoria can theoretically be alleviated with hormone treatment, other gender affirming care. So it's an improvement than just listing being trans as a disorder. But gender dysphoria, DSM. DSM-5, criteria for gender dysphoria. A marketing group means one's experience or spectrum of the natural gender of at least 6 months in duration, as manifested by at least 2 of the following.
And the DSM, so in the DSM-5, gender dysphoria is listed as a mental disorder that can arise as a result of extreme stress or distress that comes from one's own gender identity not lining up with what they were.
You just said it's listed as a mental disorder.
No. See, the wording here is very tricky and important. And so it can be diagnosed as a mental disorder, gender dysphoria specifically, and this is not done to stigmatize trans people. It specifically does not list trans people or non-binary people as having a mental illness.
Sorry, hold on.
He didn't say that. He didn't say that. He said that just gender dysphoria was diagnosed. Gender dysphoria is not the same as just being trans. Dude, Lance has such a bad understanding of all of these issues. They should just never talk about it. I hate all. It's okay. I need to whip out the Factorio again. What is it called? Paragons or Paradorns? What's the like 50,000 hour Factorio mod?
Why is it stigmatizing to have a mental illness?
It's stigmatizing to say that trans people or being trans by definition is itself just a mental illness.
But it's not being trans by definition. It's having gender dysphoria. Those two things are different, unless you're a true scum or a trans medicalist or whatever, which I am, by the way. But you can have a trans person with managed gender dysphoria, and that is managed via hormone care or other forms of gender affirming treatment.
This is what right-wingers are consistently doing.
No, gender
Tim Pool.
A right-winger is never, ever drawing this distinction. And it's hilarious that you would even think they would know the difference. What?
As himself tweeted that out.
But being trans is not the same as having gender
dysphoria.
Anyway.
Correct.
It's like, not. But that's why it's important. Yeah, but it's important to actually identify these things, whether or not they're correct.
He did identify that, though. You're the one that's conflating the two.
And again, it lists experiencing gender dysphoria as a mental disorder. So that's different than your statement. Both statements that you made so far.
What statement? Is that different?
So I feel like you told me, do you stand by this? I said yes. And then you said, no, you're wrong. And then you read me something that just echoed back what I just said. I might need more caffeine, but you got to explain this to me.
So
you're saying it's
so first off, it's not mental illness. It's a mental disorder, right?
I don't actually know if these things are that meaningfully different. I'm not sure, but
we're distinguishing between those two. And then secondly, it's not by definition if you are trans or if you are non-binary, you have a mental disorder either, because that's not what the DSM. No, I know, but that's what the implication of that sentence and you then doubling down on it means.
You asked if gender dysphoria in the DSM.
I didn't ask anything. I read you a quote of yourself that you had said out loud. And I said, do you still stand by that?
The quote was...
You said it, I'm going to quote you here. Gender dysphoria is listed in the DSM. Maybe it shouldn't be, but as of now, gender dysphoria itself is a mental illness. Maybe we'll look back and say that it shouldn't have been.
Yes. I don't know if Lance even knows the original statement that he read. I don't know why anybody lets this guy go out and debate with anybody ever. He's actually very brave and stupid. Actually, just probably more stupid.
Out loud. And I said, do you still stand by that? Even though it's factually incorrect.
It's factually incorrect that the DSM-5 has a condition called gender dysphoria?
See, now you're changing the topic. It's factually incorrect that they list it as a mental illness. That is not correct.
You're saying it's a mental disorder, not a mental illness.
No, I'm not saying generally that it's a mental disorder.
Oh, sorry. Well, I mean, I already knew this. You know this, right? You understand the trick that's going on here is that You can't say anything related to trans, nothing related to trans. It has anything to do with like a disorder or illness at all, because then it's like mean and stigmatizing, which is very strange because if you were conservative, like if I was going to be, if I'm going to be and a conservative, I would just immediately grant that. And I would say, oh, actually, I agree with you. I don't think any of it is a mental illness at all. I think these people are just crazy. Also, they shouldn't get any drugs, because why would you give people drugs if they don't even have a problem to diagnose? We should treat all hormone therapy as just being recreational use. And if you want to go and abuse hormones or whatever recreationally, you should have to be 18 or older at the very least. So I win that argument automatically on minors doing gender affirming care. And then we have to argue on should the DEA regulate things as narcotics if you're like doing Brazilian anime estrogen or any other type of hormone injection. But like, this is such a stupid argument.
Sort of, I'm saying, if you experience gender dysphoria, specifically the DSM-5 says that that can be classified as a mental disorder. If you experience gender dysphoria, extreme distress and duress.
Yeah. I don't understand what, sorry, it sounds like we're both saying that being trans is one thing.
Keep saying that we're saying the same thing, but we're not. One obviously is being utilized by the right to stigmatize trans people.
Why do you keep saying what's being utilized when you're still trying to pin down what the definition is? Because again, right, you can see him working backwards, right? He doesn't actually give a about what the truth of the matter is or what the fact of the matter is. He just cares like, how is a thing used poorly? And then he's defining the truth retrospectively or retroactively from there. Not retrospectively, retroactively from there.
This is one of the reasons why people like Tim Pool will frequently make statements where they say being trans is a mental illness. It's actually in the DSM-5. It says you're
being trans is, as a mental illness is not the same thing as having gender dysphoria as a mental illness, right? My understanding is as of right now, we don't treat people for being trans. I don't think there's ever been an established way to do that. You treat people with gender dysphoria.
Mentally ill and stuff like that, because they both think that having a mental illness is something worth of stigmatization. And in addition to that, they want to associate that directly with trans people. So I think furthering that idea, especially coming from, again, someone like you, who is not someone who identifies as a right-winger, a far-right extremist, or any of that kind of stuff, it then gives ammunition. Tim Pool can say, well, yeah, Jesse Singal said here that the DSM-5 says it's a mental illness.
What do you think the DSM-5 says gender dysphoria is?
Can we pull up the DSM-5 and just read the actual definitions?
Oh no! Uh-oh.
I'm extremely. You seem like a friendly guy interpersonally, but I'm very.
He's very retarded though.
Confused right now because I feel like you're yelling at me, and I don't. Well, not yelling. You're not yelling at me. Your tone is totally fine. But the DSM.
I was like, I don't believe I've yelled once this entire time. But anyways, I'm going to be. I want to pull it up here so we don't get anything mixed up. So it's on table 2. The DSM-5 criteria for gender dysphoria are marked incongruence between one's experienced and expressed gender and natal gender of at least.
Criteria for gender dysphoria. Criteria for what? What is the criteria laying out? To diagnose it? To diagnose it as what?
6 months in duration, as manifested by at least 2 of the following. A marked incongruence between one's experienced expressed gender, primary and or secondary sex characteristics, or in young adolescence, the anticipated secondary sex characteristics. B, a strong desire to be rid of one's primary and or secondary sex characteristics.
Jesse should just ask him, wait a second, this came out of, which book are you quoting out of? And Lance's like, this is in the DSM-5. And he's like, and he should just say, what does DSM stand for again? Because the DSM stands for, it's the diagnostic and it's like statistics manual, I think, for mental disorders. I think that is like the full, wait, hold on, fuck. Wait, let me check real quick. Wait, delete the spot if I'm wrong. The diagnostic and, oh yeah, okay. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition. That's what you're reading out of. So what are you talking about?
Characteristics because of a marked incongruence with one's experienced and expressed gender, or in young adolescence, or a desire to prevent the development of the anticipated secondary sex characteristics. C, a strong desire for the primary and secondary sex characteristics of the other gender. D, a strong desire to be the other gender, or some.
You're reading some of the criteria for the diagnosis.
Affirmative gender different from one's designated gender. E, a strong desire to be treated as the other gender, or some alternative gender difference from one's assigned gender. And then F, the final one, sorry, this is taking a long time, a strong conviction that one's typical feelings and reactions to other gender or some alternative gender differ from one's designated gender. So this condition is associated clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning.
What does that mean?
So what you just read, those are the criteria for what?
For gender dysphoria.
Which is?
And what is gender dysphoria?
Did you want me to reread the entire thing?
No, those are the diagnostic criteria, you retarded dipshit.
The gender dysphoria is what they determine. Again, gender dysphoria is what they determine, okay, to be someone who is experiencing distress, duress as a result of having...
No, I know.
Distress and duress are two of the huge components that usually comes when you're identifying a what.
But what does it reflect that it's listed in the DSM-5? Like, what is listed in the
if you
DSM-5?
experience gender dysphoria, then that is what is classified as a mental disorder.
So what are we talking about here, buddy?
Because they're doing that not to stigmatize it, but in order to allow doctors for the ability for them to diagnose it properly.
That's why it's in the diagnostic manual. Yes, that's what. Yes, you're diagnosing a mental disorder of some kind so that you can treat it somehow.
You get medical attention.
So you're saying
that distinction is very important. And you keep going back to, I think we're saying the same thing. We're not. The term mental illness is never used at all in the DSM-5 in relation to trans people. And also, being trans or being non-binary is not itself a mental disorder.
Careful. Are trans and non-binary different categories now?
Experiencing gender dysphoria.
That's what he said literally right at the beginning of this. That's literally what he said.
Okay. Do you think gender dysphoria is listed in the DSM-5 as a mental disorder?
Experiencing gender dysphoria is.
Experiencing gender dysphoria is a mental disorder.
You said it, I'm going to quote you here. Gender dysphoria is listed in the DSM. Maybe it shouldn't be, but as of now, gender dysphoria itself is a mental illness. Maybe we'll look back and say that it shouldn't have been.
So
5 as a mental disorder.
Experiencing gender dysphoria is.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we agree, unless I'm confused. Well, but what's the difference between a mental disorder and a mental illness? And we're talking about the symptoms. We're not talking about being trans. I'm also not even defending. I'm just saying it's in the DSM, and you won't. So
you're saying that it doesn't matter to you if you call it a mental illness, even though the DSM-5 doesn't call it a mental illness, because you don't see it's a distinction without a difference to you between the two.
The DSM-5 is a list of mental health diagnoses or mental disorders, and one of them is gender dysphoria. In the ICD, they branched it out and they gave it its own category, so it's no longer considered a form of mental disorder. I also I just got to say, as someone with a family history of a fair amount of mental illness and my own struggles, like this idea that let's say gender dysphoria is a mental illness, like that doesn't mean people who have it are any less worthy of everything they deserve in life. I think it's this weird back.
He should just flip this. He should just ask Lance, do you think that depression is a mental illness? And then if Lance says yes, like, why are you stigmatizing depression?
No one is implying that. I mean, that's a very underhanded tactic to try and get away from the fact that you were incorrect about this.
I'm not talking about
it's not about stigmatizing.
He wasn't incorrect, though.
People with mental illness, but it is, again, being utilized and weaponized.
Like, by the way, Lance posted this clip of him just being completely and utterly wrong.
By the right, to the far right in this regard, to try and stigmatize trans people. And this is yet another example where I think that they can use quotes that you've said or statements you've made. And again, it's not coming from a right-winger. It's coming from liberal journalist Jesse Singal.
Okay.